We didn't do it with Rehydrated. We didn't do it with Cosmic Shake.
Movie forever! It's showtime!
Let's
fucking go!
Let me check
No,
the
I do
prostate.
not! I don't want to play any of these games!
Prostate.
Play any of them!
Earning 68,000 subs in 80 days, the SHiFT-A-Thon was a channel-defining event which ran from August 5th through October 25th, 2022. At some point throughout this time, our Twitch channel reached over 30,000 active subscriptions, to which I promised to create a documentary about the event. But after some thought, it became clear that a documentary-style video about what was ultimately an incentivized shitpost stream felt a bit aggrandizing and also unnecessary, because the full 1,920 hours are all watchable on my VOD channel Shift Replay. So instead, I decided to gather my thoughts and create a retrospective style video. 1 year later, after enough time had passed enough to gain a clearer perspective on those 80 days, and after having gone through a follow-up subathon trying to fix some of the shortcomings with the first. I believe the passage of time and also the results of this recent event have helped enhance my perspective on the first one. This is the good, the bad, and the movie. It all started with a rumor circulating in April of 2022, claiming that Twitch was planning to reduce premium Twitch partners from a 70-30 revenue split to 50-50. The rumor leaked from a credible source, so at the time it was something that I and many other mid to small size streamers who have been on the platform since the mid-2010s or earlier were pretty concerned about. At the time, I'd been focusing on achieving the first 42 in Battle for Bikini Bottom any percent, and creating a series explaining the full run for my viewers' entertainment. But this all got interrupted by the sudden need to capitalize on what might have been the final summer with the revenue share that I depended on for the past half-decade up until that point to speedrun and create content full-time. The phrase subathon was a term floating in my chat for a while, and many were curious as to whether I'd ever do one. It's a simple game. The streamer goes live with a set amount of time on the timer. When the timer runs down to 0 seconds, the stream ends, but the chat is allowed to intervene by donating to add specified amounts of time back to the stream. It's a great sub-incentive and a more focused way of applying donation goals to a stream, which I've done plenty of over the years, but scheduling and following through with them in a timely manner has not always been my greatest strength, especially with focusing on speedrunning all the time. A subathon would be a straightforward way to set time aside from the grind to focus on sub incentives for a short block of time. But funny enough, I'd actually tried my hand at this back in 2017, a bit under a year into streaming and even before the gift sub feature was a thing on Twitch. Needless to say, the addition of gift subs, bits, and the tools that have merged over the past 5 years to design merch quickly without a middleman made the potential of a new subathon quite lucrative. Paired with how the original Sponge-A-Thon from 2017 only ended because I wasn't willing to leave my stream on while I was sleeping. We capped it at somewhere a bit over 20 hours, which at the time was the longest I was willing to go without sleeping. Obviously, since then, most of our sub incentives had just become one-off meme runs with media share, casual playthroughs of joke games, and so forth. It took a while for the subathon idea to grow on me again, but once it had, the potential for something special became clear. On July 1st, 2022, the Sponge-A-Thon 2022 began. Like the first Sponge-A-Thon from 5 years prior, there were select few SpongeBob games to be played in full, though this time in a set order with challenges attached to make things more interesting. The goal was to finish all 5 playthroughs before the stream timer hit 0, and viewers could add time back to the stream at 3 minutes per sub, and equivalent time values for donations and bits. At first it seemed like 3 minutes per sub would be challenging, but we quickly learned how wrong that was. It took 35 hours straight through to finish the games list, with many hours still left on the clock when we ended, effectively making the subathon aspect not tense at all because people knew it wasn't going to end. It was a great success for what it was, but still ultimately felt like a trial run. We still had not tried our hand at a true subathon designed to last for days or even weeks. Not long after the conclusion of the Sponge-A-Thon, one of my viewers offered me a generous number of subs to replay the same challenge attached to the SpongeBob movie game again, to which I sweetened the deal by offering to play through the whole game in a tuxedo. I can't take full credit for the tuxedo idea, as this had been going on around the same time this meme was a thing, but the idea quickly developed its own personality as we added more assets such as the penthouse, classical music, among other fancy things. Though even at the end of this playthrough, it seemed like, to put it bluntly, everyone just wanted to spend more money. Specifically, on movie! What is movie? The SpongeBob movie game has been a running gag in my chat for years now, as it more or less serves as the low-budget movie promotional follow-up to a game that I speedrun on a daily basis. Naturally, some first-time viewers over the years have been curious of whether I've played it or even am aware of it. The humorous part, of course, is that I'm asked about it all the time, and I've made my stance on it clear, almost scripted at this point because I've had to answer the question so often, that the game is just a mid-platformer with a ton of filler which I have no interest in pursuing serious projects with, such as those I've done with my speedruns, tutorials, explanations, deep dives, and documentaries on Battle for Bikini Bottom. But what if, for a full week, I were to entertain the idea of switching to the movie game full-time, and doing so not in a penthouse, but in a palace built on royal wealth and a live orchestra to complement it, with an even more masochistic challenge in place? This was the foundation of Movie Madness. For 1 week, I would attempt to beat the SpongeBob movie game damageless without failing a single challenge as well. Obviously, some glitches trivializing the challenge would be banned, pause scumming, and warping before dying would not be allowed, but to make things even more chaotic, we would not allow get out of jail free cards for the game failing itself. For example, the notorious fake ring glitch, or stuns not registering from body slams,
Dude, it happened again!
or enemy projectiles not reflecting and clipping through your hitbox.
That's... What? What the
The SpongeBob movie game is known for its instability. It felt like the perfectly chaotic game to run such a masochistic challenge, having to return to the beginning of the game after each fail, being forced to drive the sandwich and slide the bathtub uphill for hours to return to where the run last died. This would not only be a hilarious manifestation of a meme that's developed in my chat over the past half-decade, but could also be used to drum up excitement leading up to the premiere of the first gameplay trailer of SpongeBob the Cosmic Shake, the new SpongeBob game and follow-up to Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which had not been given a release date at the time. With the movie meme at its all-time peak, Twitch revenue share cuts on the way, and a new SpongeBob game about to drop, it was time to drive the sandwich. On August 5th, 2022, the madness would begin. For 2 minutes a sub, chat could add time to the stream until the 1 week mark, when the Cosmic Shake trailer was set to air at Gamescom 2022. If the timer hit 0, the challenge of beating movie would go uncompleted. So for those invested in the challenge being completed, the stakes were high. Throughout the hours when I was sleeping or practicing BFBB, chat would attempt to beat the GameCube version of SpongeBob Revenge of the Flying Dutchman using only Twitch chat controls. This kept viewers and patrons engaged throughout the entire night to provide the 24/7 entertainment experience, which is a staple of the subathon concept. Without high stakes 24/7, it might as well not be a continuous marathon. What makes it special is the incentive to stay tuned in the entire time, even when the streamer is asleep. So the viewers had their own challenge to complete as well, and put a lot of effort into doing so. And of course, their challenge ran on the same clock as mine. If the timer hit 0 at any point, the stream is over. By the end of the week, much fun was had and much money was made. But the success of the marathon and the challenge not having been completed after a week led many to ask for an extension. So I'd uncap the subathon and allow it to run through the rest of the weekend, knowing it would probably just end up dying on Monday anyway. Surely.
What the fuck?
Poopy movie emergency. This ain't poopy movie emergency. Shit is approaching. Plank out prison. Nobody else can get none.
1 month later, it was still movie forever. The stream milestones hit within this month were unlike anything I've ever seen for a channel this size, and I believe those who were here to experience this live would agree. It was a massive rush of all the fans who had gathered to watch my speedruns over the past 6 years help movie take over Twitch for an entire month. But how could a challenge this simple go on for so long? Obviously, the overarching milestones and rally to be part of this first-time phenomenon for the channel were large factors, but along with large incentives came smaller incentives, such as forcing me to complete an off-route objective for subs, particularly unfair objectives, making it likely for me to take a hit and therefore have to start the run all over again. Viewers could also block upgrades as an incentive, and these upgrades are crucial for executing no-hit strategies. And finally, the viewers could give subs to unforced objectives and unblock power-ups. Those invested in seeing the run reach the end would give subs to undo the other viewers' restrictions, and those giving subs to restrict the run very much understood the meta of doing so in order to encourage the other side to give subs to unblock. Both sides were eager for one to outdo the other, since it made the run more exciting and kept the marathon going longer. It was a massive community effort to keep movie played for as long as possible, and if all else failed, any viewer could give 100 subs at the end of a run to force a reset back to the beginning. No questions asked. Though this was a controversial allowance, it was always an option from the start, and I believe it was clear to most that the no-hit attempts of the SpongeBob movie game were not meant to be taken seriously. But after many forced resets on the final boss and an unimaginable number of forcing and unblocking exchanges, movie was finally defeated. At this point, the viewers had become more invested in the subathon itself rather than the challenge and the meme. It had become a contest to see how high the sub count could go and how much longer it could possibly last for. My original plan was to continue going for higher game completion until eventually collecting every token in the game as opposed to just the minimum requirement of 52. But after one day of this encore, I could tell we needed to shake things up. Thus began Incredithon, the second phase of the 80-day monstrosity. So Incredithon was actually originally set to take place later that same year around the holidays. It was an idea I'd already become invested in, but I had a feeling that with the Cosmic Shake coming soon at an unknown date, plus the iron still being hot from movie madness, it was already showtime. The first noticeable difference with the Incredibles game was the absurd number of mobs spawning in every level. Unlike the SpongeBob movie game, which had a binary health point system, the Incredibles movie game has a meter as the player is supposed to take multiple multiple hits before dying. Clearly this game was not created with the intent for the player to avoid being hit, and special thanks as well to CeelYS from the Heavy Iron modding community for creating the one-hit kill mod along with some other meme additions that made this playthrough a lot funnier. In general, the support from the Incredibles fans throughout this section of the marathon was great, and I'm also appreciative that people enjoyed this segue from the SpongeBob content. Unfortunately, however, we later found out that in level 9, about halfway through the game, there is an unavoidable hit in the robot arena that you must take following the first Omnidroid fight. It was then decided that the best course of action at that point was to defeat the Omnidroid as a no-hit challenge in and of itself, effectively completing the blue suit portion of the Incredibles movie, and making a final push to 30,000 subs on Twitch as our final milestone of the subathon. In hindsight, this would have been the perfect way to go, but you know, as they say, once you're in the heat of it, man, it's hard to let it go. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some great moments that occurred in the variety content mix-up that became more prevalent post-Incredithon, and the Family Guy challenge was awesome until we reached the soccer field in level 8, which I suppose required too much grinding to perfect for the viewer's interest. But I will say we did manage to no-hit the soccer field itself. There just wasn't enough time to get it in a run. At that point, the viewers had preferred we played something else. But funny enough, I have gotten some requests to play it again since the end of that subathon, even though that game really sucks, but I'll keep it in mind. Ultimately, a subathon is an extended sub incentive, whereas a traditional sub incentive has a set activity plan for once a sub number is reached. A subathon is a continuous goal that runs on time instead. And with patrons gaining full control over the stream as time is still being added, along with the tension of not knowing when the stream will end, it can become quite addictive for everyone involved, especially for the streamer who is of course profiting from all this. So this attachment that I and the viewers alike grew to the subathon started to get out of hand at some point after the conclusion of Incredithon and the stream's peak sub count. At some point I even tried offering a 100-day cap on the event just to give us a clear goal to reach, and then forcibly end it once and for all with a big celebration. But each time it was brought up, it was extremely controversial and most viewers declined. It was at that point that I'd realized I'd fully lost control of my stream. It simply became a game of how long it could possibly go on for, and with that increase in quality came a proportional decrease in quality. Though the subathon continued for around another month until it eventually ended from a delayed payment causing the timer to hit 0, some issues which were not addressed and ironed out in the first subathon would seep their way into the inevitable follow-up, the Sponge-A-Thon 2023, during which I would play through as many SpongeBob games as possible and grade them along with other bonus games instead of just playing movie. As early as the day after the first subathon ended, viewers were already asking when the next subathon would start, and in early December the Cosmic Shake was given a release date of January 31st, the very next month. Many were keen on a Cosmic Shake-A-Thon, to which I declined, feeling not enough time had passed since the previous one to contend against its status, along with, more importantly, feeling the idea was forced and milked because my viewers knew I was going to speedrun Cosmic Shake for a little bit regardless of whether there was a subathon or not. While I stand by not putting content I'd normally stream out of my own interest behind a paywall, I've since reconsidered my decision to avoid doing a shorter, capped, and more focused subathon sooner if viewers were asking for it. As of right now, I believe that building up a new subathon as an annual event put a lot of pressure on everyone, including myself, to avoid letting it die and having to wait a full year for another. And obviously, when money is required to keep a subathon going, the disproportional amount of pressure over fun makes contributing to something like this feel less worthwhile. How fun can it possibly be if the fear of letting it end is overpowering the actual fun? Now, this way of thinking made sense 50 days into the last subathon, when it had already been going on for so long and most people just wanted to see how long it could go for, but starting a new subathon, already feeling the desperation to keep it from ending straight from the start, was unnecessary. This leads me to discuss my first poor judgment which carried over from the later half of the first subathon into the recent one, and that would be not sleeping until I knew a full night's rest was possible before the timer hit 0. The first subathon began with me sleeping at a scheduled time every day regardless of where the timer was, as I wasn't invested at this point and didn't care to be present for the end, had it actually occurred. After the first week through the first 2 months though, we kinda just got used to the timer always being high, so I suppose a lot of us, including myself, grew a habit of feeling entitled for that time to sleep after months of this. Especially if the timer was low during the hours when most people slept, it made sense to stay up a little longer until we knew it would at least make it to the point when people woke up. This eventually just became habit and fully accepted, without acknowledging the underlying flaws of this mentality, because it just worked. In the Sponge-A-Thon 2023, however, this was not the case. After the first week, the timer was rarely in a place where even a 90-minute nap was possible with this mentality. This meant throughout the rest of the month, I was only allowing myself a nap a couple of times a day at some points, sometimes just sleeping 3 to 4 hours for some days in a row, or just not sleeping at all. And when the rest of the day involves 18, 20, 22 more hours of streaming, it gets really exhausting going for weeks on end, man. At the moment, I have some editors working on condensing some of the playthroughs I believe to be the better ones of the event, but watching some of this footage back has actually been shocking to see how tired and miserable I sounded during times when I thought things were feeling fine in the moment. Are we going to be edging for the rest of this subathon because this sucks? There are also several blocks of the stream I can barely remember, and I suppose that speaks for itself. And funny enough, the first week of the subathon this year was actually more successful by all metrics compared to the first week of last year's. The timer was higher under tougher conditions and views were way up. In fact, the one last year almost ended within the first 3 nights, and that didn't even come close to happening this time. This year's only started to drop off after the first week when the sleep schedule became unpredictable, and also due to another shortcoming in design which I'll go into detail soon. So it's as if I'd just gone back to the roots of last year's event and slept at the same time every night. Things were on track to play out even better than last year's first month. I guess we won't know for sure now, though I believe the other issues with the event would have prevented that from happening anyway. This was just a mentality that was very deeply conditioned from the last time, and we really just needed a wake-up call. So yeah, not allowing myself to sleep was easily the greatest shortcoming of the subathon, and if we decide to do another one, it won't be ran like this. Besides, I feel like the early days of Movie Madness, including moments of the timer nearly running out while I was sleeping, is part of what made everybody feel so attached to the first event initially. It felt more like a 24/7 stream like it was supposed to, rather than just sleeping when SHiFT sleeps and watching him half asleep when he's awake. If there's one thing I'm sure of after experiencing these subathons, it's that no amount of money is worth my mental and physical health. I know I can speak for the viewers who supported these events when I say this. By the end of this past event, it was clear to everyone it needed to end before those two things got even worse. It's of my own nature to always see everything to the bitter end, for better or worse, but torturing myself for content is not only concerning to the viewers who have watched me for nearly 8 years at this point, it also just makes for bad entertainment. I felt a bit of guilt for only playing movie 8 hours a day at the start of last year's subathon, and spending the afternoons watching chat try to beat the Dutchman while practicing BFB, but I don't think that streaming 18 plus hours a day was the right solution. We need a better balance, a more sustainable balance, a structured sleep schedule as well. And just to briefly mention, switching to Twitch Plays GBA games over Dolphin ended up not being as engaging as I expected. That feedback has been considered. It just felt like the GBA games with fewer inputs would be easier for more people to get into, but it was worth a try. It's the community effort that makes these events fun. If the event relies on just a couple of people participating while I sleep, a couple of people trying to keep the timer from reaching 0, or playing games only a couple of people are interested in, things can derail quickly as these things alienate most viewers and grow entitlement for a couple of people who are doing everything. We've already established how the night streams ended up quiet this time due to the unpredictable scheduling and low stakes when I slept. But after the first week, once we burned through most of the staple Sponge-a-thon games, a good portion of the marathon became variety only a select few in chat were interested in watching. Those few usually being the ones who watched through the night or were up early to vote on the first game. While this may be a decent incentive to encourage people to check in early, it doesn't help that, for example, the 1 PM crowd probably won't be interested in what the 11 AM crowd voted for. The incentive to allow 100 subs for forcing any game on the list also derailed things a bit further. Because, and while I'm appreciative of the selections most people made on their games, there were a few times when the majority of chat was engaged in the game that was selected this way. The game schedule was structureless and chaotic, which can be funny and makes for a good rewatch, but for the longevity of the marathon and watching it live, it can suck. We figured this out at some point and began starting the early mornings of each section with some newly added SpongeBob game challenge runs, just to find some common ground for onlooking morning and afternoon viewers. All things considered, this was a good band-aid, but the purpose of the subathon had already become far too confusing at that point for it to work long-term. The key takeaway here is that my community can mostly agree on watching Nickelodeon games and bottom-of-the-barrel shovelware to farm laughs and clips. If we do another subathon, these will be the only focuses, and the transitions through each game will be a lot smoother. On this topic, while I enjoyed incorporating channel points for those who couldn't afford to contribute with subs this time, it did take a while to decide which games would get played, and didn't really help determine which game chat actually wanted to watch most. Fewer decisions from chat causes less fatigue. Movie Madness and Incredithon had the strengths of insisting the viewer comes along for the ride, which I feel was an underrated aspect of the last subathon we shouldn't have totally abandoned. And now we'll get into the more controversial topics. Subathons are ultimately a support system, and those donating for incentives are entitled to have their incentives completed as described. It's on me, the streamer, to choose which incentives to offer and refuse donations for incentives I'm not willing to complete beforehand. Once the incentive has been purchased, the only individual who can choose to end it is the purchaser. This seems straightforward for most viewers until the start of Custergate, the infamous day of the subathon where I was given 5,000 subs at once to replay the same gameplay loop of Teletubbies over 1,000 times, base boosted. The controversial part though, this individual paid a fraction of what everybody else paid for the exact same incentive up until this point. And to make matters worse, nobody wanted to watch it for an entire day.
It was time for Tubby Custard.
The local pricing exploit on Twitch has been known for a while, but it only started gaining attention sometime in August as more streamers claiming they were exploited by this started popping up on social media. In short, Twitch has adjusted prices for subs locally based on the exchange value of the currency the user is purchasing with. So in some places, Twitch subs can cost slightly more or slightly less than the usual $5 of the country it's based in, as Twitch still wants to sell the product in areas where the average person likely cannot afford the equivalent of $5. For example, at the time of this video's creation, and also during the subathon, 5 United States dollars exchanges for 134 Turkish lira due to their currency's hyperinflation. Twitch knows that it won't earn a sub from a Turkish viewer for 134 lira, so they reduced the local pricing to around 10 Turkish lira, for which 10 Turkish lira would exchange for around 37 cents in the United States. It's important to note that currency conversions have always been somewhat of an issue with sub incentives on Twitch since local pricing began, because Twitch still makes the same revenue cut from this exchange. It's just the streamer who's offering the same thing to other people who are paying the normal 5, but are occasionally having to complete incentives for far less if someone wants to use a hyperinflated currency to buy a sub. So the only ones winning here are the single viewer for getting their incentive filled for pennies on the dollar because they exchange US dollars for Turkish lira by wiring to an offshore bank account, and Twitch for getting the same percentage of revenue on each sale regardless of how many subs are purchased. Only the streamer and the viewers who gifted subs at the normal price, which would be 99.9% of people watching, are the ones who get screwed. And this is the risk of running a subathon where subs and dollar values have congruence on the menu of incentives. But it's rarely a big enough issue to care since the pricing is, well, local. Most people in small niche communities are genuine, just donating what they can afford, which would not be hundreds of their own currency if that economy is already struggling. So there's no need to take extreme measures and say ban all Turkish viewers from participating in the subathon. It's too small to make an issue. The issue arises, however, when a wealthy Western individual wire transfers American dollars to a Turkish bank account they opened in order to purchase subs for 1/15 of what everybody else is paying. The guy who was doing this under one of his burner accounts called Tubby McCustardson had been more or less using rolls of dimes to force incentives in games he wanted to see played throughout the week leading up to the Teletubbies scandal slowly enough to not raise suspicion. But when 50 consecutive 100 sub bombs came through, which would normally cost $500 per 100 times 50, most people were at least skeptical. The greatest question here, of course, is what were this guy's intentions? Which is what I was asking too, despite obviously giving him the benefit of the doubt when he did this. So here's what he said on 2 separate occasions.
Would have been funny silent protest against Twitch policies right before September.
You can't just hijack the subathon for your own agenda, dude, lol.
Can you just level with me and tell me why you did it? I'm not taking this personally, I just want to know why you did it.
I mean, anything I say is just gonna be excuses, but just wanted to try it out.
So at first he says he was doing it to protest Twitch, but then a day later he says he just wanted to try it out. These are 2 astronomically different motivations, and when someone can't keep the story straight, it usually means they're not trustworthy. So from this point on, I made sure to keep an eye on this guy, and we'll get back to that later. Though this guy was being dishonest, I still had not addressed the exploit on stream, nor in the document detailing how the subathon works up until that point. So I still fulfilled the obligation to complete the Tubby Custards until we both came to an agreement to stop after around 400 of them. At this point, the guy had already given me a written permission to stop, but still being suspicious and knowing how fraud accusations work, I had to make sure we had a foolproof agreement before ending. Option A was to finish the rest of the custards as planned, but I would no longer accept contributions from him for the rest of the subathon, for it is well within my own right to refuse donations from viewers for incentives I'm not willing to complete. Option B was my trade offer, which was to remove 100 hours from the timer, which still left him with over 20 hours which wouldn't have been added without the exploit, and allow him a second chance to contribute for incentives by other means than giving subs. He chose option B. But for those 400 Tubby Custards, most viewers were insisting I don't finish them because of his foul play. This may be true, he did cheat the system, but a deal is still a deal. And like I said, it's better for all of us than me having to deal with a fraud accusation. The irony is that this guy did end up contributing more than $1,000 after this incident to see more of his games get played, which he then charged back on PayPal days after the subathon ended. And he lied about the reasoning in the chargeback claim with a fake story attached to why the item wasn't as described, which is literally a fraud attempt of over $1,000. I'm not sure why I gave this guy a second chance, nor am I sure why he tried to lie about it when recorded evidence of him buying the incentives was uploaded to the internet days earlier, followed by me completing them, but I digress. Custardgate was an entire day of a subathon wasted on one person's activity, which otherwise would have been spent on what the majority of viewers wanted to watch and contribute to fairly. I was not only robbed of my time, but hundreds were robbed of theirs in an event they waited for a year to see. One might refute this take by saying that I still got paid something, even if that something was 1/15 of the congruent amount. But you must understand this was all happening during a subathon, where had I not been stuck doing Tubby Custard for an entire day, I could have been completing incentives from other viewers who would have preferred we'd done something other than a 1-minute base boosted loop of a preschool game. This was an opportunity cost for me, but the viewers got the shorter end of the stick in my opinion. Not only did they lose an entire day of the subathon, they also had to watch some guy get his Tubby Custards for 1/15 of what they had just paid for the same thing up until this point. The custard meme was funny for an hour or so here and there, but when this guy forced it on the stream for a full day for rolls of dimes, it was a huge demoralizer for the viewers. This situation was most unfair to them, especially because I was obligated to honor the request to avoid accusations of fraud, and I'm thankful my viewers understood this. They weren't happy about it though. A lot of people were saying this guy should have have been banned from chat for what he did. But again, this guy was dishonest, but what he did was technically inbound since it hadn't been acknowledged yet. A ban for that is harsh. However, he did end up at some point harassing some of our viewers in DMs, so yeah, he ended up getting banned for that anyway. Can I ask you a question though? How do I know you're not going to charge back?
I'm not going to charge back, lol.
Swear.
Your balls are going to explode.
Toward the end of the first subathon, the chat would say the stream is edging when the timer is falling to 0 without intervention. It was a funny meme, and I've definitely had my fun telling chat they were edging too hard and whatnot. I don't think there was a specific moment when the phrase became negative, but toward the end of the second subathon, it definitely had become synonymous with frustration. With a clear head now and giving most people the benefit of the doubt, I don't think the frustration from chat was mostly coming from others not donating to boost the timer in low situations either. I believe it was mostly provoked by the constant beeping sound attached to the timer when it was under a minute. Other than not letting myself sleep, of course, this was the worst blunder of the subathon, and by far the worst edition this year. Last year, one of the biggest criticisms I received was constantly mentioning the timer's position, and I came to believe this habit was greatly enforced by feeling the need to check it constantly. But theoretically, knowing that a sound would play when the timer gets low would help stop that habit before it forms. While I still think that having sound cues on the timer to keep it mentally present is a good idea, especially for me while I'm trying to focus on actually streaming, it didn't have to be this persistent and annoying. The major oversight here was that I assumed chat would not allow the timer to fall under a minute that often during the subathon, and boy was I wrong. Timer is under 1 minute. Under 1 minute. Under 10 seconds. I think that's it. Thanks for the 100 bits. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are you guys just gonna let him sit here and do this by himself? Because at this point, despite many chatters vocalizing their desire for the stream to continue, they more or less just anxiously commented on it while expecting one person to keep it alive for them. In this scenario, the person donating at the final second was just trying to save the stream over and over to give someone else the opportunity to jump in and save it with them. The opportunity was rarely taken, and the poor guy just wouldn't let the stream end. It's a tough spot for me as well, since every second is an incentive someone paid for, so it's not entirely up to me to end the stream, especially not knowing if or when someone was about to sub. It was just awful to watch, and the constant beeping only made this dynamic more frustrating for everyone involved. I know some of you can relate to the feeling of everything, especially loud repetitive noises, becoming infinitely more annoying during a true state of exhaustion. Have this continue for hours while the viewers are also frustrated over the way things were going, and you have a recipe for complete disaster. A prime example of how one unchecked major flaw of the event layered into another. We were all getting fed up with the beeping, and chat started to become fed up with the edging. By now, some people in chat were telling everyone to stop edging, and this is where the crash began.
Money!
No?
Money!
Oh my god, I'm gonna fucking scream. Please stop. That was so close! Is it really that fucking exciting, man? Is it that exciting?
I'm tired of chat doing this edging shit. Just let the man sleep for 8 hours.
Oh, you want to stop edging? Get a fucking job and give me money. I'm tired of all this shit, man. I'm tired of people fucking complaining about people not giving money. Go shovel snow, go mow a lawn, do something. Instead of fucking ask people to do shit. I'm tired of fucking hearing all this shit. I've been saying for fucking 3 weeks that it's gonna get to this point. Like, what the fuck what is wrong with everybody, man? Just fucking end it! Just end it, man! Just stop giving me fucking money already! If it's gonna be like this, nobody's enjoying this anymore. This is how we all fucking feel, man. This is the quiet part that all the real fans are thinking. Nobody's enjoying this anymore. Just let it fucking end. Like, you're literally just fucking trolling me with this 100-bit shit when it's under a minute. You just beep, 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 beep. Just fucking end it already. This person did not deserve to be attacked. In hindsight, this comment is harmless, but at the time I interpreted it as a call from one person to other people to donate to the stream and boost the timer. This attitude had been fairly prevalent during morning sections of the stream when most of the invested viewers were still sleeping. So the stream would be close to ending, and some viewers would call on other viewers to do something about it. Sometimes people would go as far to ping others and send DMs to them asking for them to give more. I'm not sure if there's a solution to this issue or if it's just a natural side effect of running an event like this on the internet where anyone can say anything. But regardless Regardless, it's gross to see in a community this small. And yes, despite how tiresome and annoying this attitude is, this particular person in the clip did not deserve to be made an example of. However, I stand by my assertion that if you want the edging to stop, rather than calling on others who worked and saved to contribute to the subathon, you should go out, find work yourself, and do it yourself if it's that important. Regardless of how you feel about the culture of Twitch streamers accepting money for playing games and incentives, fair is fair. And yes, I really was tired of all this shit. It's not worth watching a community tear itself apart over something that's supposed to be fun, but hopefully discussing it here will cause people to reconsider this behavior in the future. Furthermore, during this part of the subathon, there was an effort to hold the timer just barely under 1 minute just to keep the beeping going non-stop instead of just letting the subathon end. And I felt that I, along with the viewers who were annoyed by this, were all being disrespected by that. If the person planned on giving that total number of bits but chose to space them in a way that plays a constant sound that everyone finds annoying, I would consider that trolling. And we've all seen our fair share of donation message trolls in our time on this website, so don't give me the money equals cannot possibly be trolling thing. Sure, we can agree to disagree, but this is still another situation where chat was screwed the worst, since they weren't the ones who designed the timer to make the noise. Seeing as I was the one who made this oversight, I shouldn't have gotten mad when someone figured out how to exploit it. In fact, I probably could have just muted the webpage the timer was running on, but I don't think the gears were turning up there at this point. I'll again restate that no amount of money is worth my mental or physical health. This is the most important realization I've had through this event. We are allowed to establish boundaries, and having dollar bills thrown at me in exchange for that noise constantly playing was not worth it. A lot of my viewers were already muting the stream because of it, and I was already hearing it all day up until that point just because of the way things happened to play out. But when I realized it was being done on purpose in that moment, it really bothered me. We all make mistakes, and ultimately it was my fault for not seeing the possible issues with this. And for what it's worth, if I could go back, I wouldn't have done it this way. So much like the Tubby Custard situation, I accepted the contributions and completed the incentive, but this does not mean I have to be happy about it. Extrapolating these kinds of situations into overall ungratefulness is an absurd argument I've only heard from bad faith accusers. My fans who have supported me for the past 7 years know that I'm grateful for their support, and their opinions are the only ones that matter to me. But I believe the only unanimous opinion at this point in the subathon was that SHiFT needed to go offline and get some rest before this got even worse. With some new experimental additions to this subathon that needed some work, there were some good changes we should discuss as well. The first being knowing when to end. At the end of the previous subathon, 10 gifted subs dropped in chat just as the timer was about to hit 0. The processing delay since the viewer technically gave the subs before 0 caused controversy, and I ended up allowing the chat the opportunity for us to continue if the timer reached 5 hours within a short period of time. It felt like the right compromise at the time, but ultimately I'm glad it didn't work. We ended up using the remaining time from the attempt to talk to chat and review how things went either way, which was well deserved after 80 days of unbelievable support. This year, however, we took a hard stance at ending as soon as the timer hit 0 regardless, with no exceptions. Because we all agreed if people are waiting until 2 seconds to boost the timer, then the marathon's continuation wasn't important enough, and it would likely just end soon anyway. The subathon actually ended the day after the timer reached 1 second, twice in the same morning, and it probably shouldn't even have made it that far. Unfortunately predictable as there's no way down from 1 second except for going to 0. And yes, a sub did come through right before it hit 0 and it processed late. Sorry man, your effort was appreciated though. But it felt relieving knowing for sure it was over, and that we now had plenty of time to discuss how things went without any timer or controversy attached. As much as this event derailed toward the end, I'd say it ended on a high note. I'm pretty satisfied with the additions of the pilot and finale scene as well. Even though the humor developed a lot throughout the month we were stuck on the cruise, it was still somewhat charming to hear the raccoon talk about changing diapers one final time. The only issue is that one of my motivators for staying up until I knew the timer wouldn't hit 0 as I slept was needing to be present to activate the final scene. This was originally supposed to run automatically, but technical issues the night before the subathon started caused that to not be the case unfortunately. And still, had it been implemented, there was a good chance that one of the timer's many glitches where it momentarily displayed 0 could have triggered it early and spoiled the ending. Not sure how I'd feel about implementing that again if we decided to do another. I believe removing the timer combo system was also a positive change. It was something we experimented with post-Incredithon last time, and pretty much functioned as a multiplier that made subs worth more time if many of them were given in a short period. Unfortunately, despite it being fun at first, it became a negative motivator toward the end, encouraging everyone to wait until subs were worth more to sub, which required waiting on someone else to give subs first. So you can see how this got tiresome for most people. And not to mention it was confusing and annoying to constantly explain. In fact, the infamous "I'm trying to save you money" clip from last year was literally me explaining how the combo timer works taken out of context. I wasn't so nice about it though because it was directed toward a guy who called me a beggar for hyping up the sub combo. In general, this year I tried to lessen the amount of time I talked about the timer, sub goals, and putting on the salesman persona to hype things up like last year. This year felt more genuine and relaxed, though I did get some comments from viewers saying they missed the old razzle dazzle. I just felt like this year's theme didn't mix well with that kind of atmosphere, and I wanted that environment to translate back to the normal speedrun streams more smoothly. Last year, we also experimented with added time bonuses for the timer staying above certain hour thresholds, along with a 30-hour timer cap to discourage massive sub dumps which would lower the stakes of the event for several days after. Both of these ideas were scrapped in the follow-up event this year. It's just nicer to have fewer numbers on the screen and clearer incentives that require no explanation. The less confusion and less talking about sub-incentives, the more gaming and more making memes. And of course, I'd like to thank Ivo, Pat Richards, Dark, and Yeoman for all your help setting up and supporting the technical aspects of this event. And while I'm at it, Jade Mallow as well for the expert advice on retro capture as always. I'd also like to briefly mention that one of the major criticisms last year from some people during the variety section was that a lot of the games didn't get finished and got flipped around after every 2 hours. So this time we made a great effort to finish as many games as possible. And we did end up finishing somewhere between 50 and 60 full games in the month that we were on. Not to mention the dozens of other games that were half finished as well, which we were trying to get to, but ultimately it was better off it ended the way it did. The bottom line is a lot more gaming this time, and I think it'll be a lot more rewatchable in the future because of that. One final aspect which was cut this year that I'd like to discuss was allowing group calls on my stream while I was sleeping. This started at some point during Movie Madness last year when I lost my voice from saying movie quite literally tens of thousands of times consecutively and popping off for all the major donations. My mods and other trusted community members offered to hop on the stream with me while I worked on the no-hit run and kept the memes flowing while my voice healed, which I'm not sure if the subathon would have lasted had they not helped. I could barely speak for almost a week, and their shared joy was a massive morale boost for me during a time when I felt like a career-defining moment was slipping away. It's to this day the most heartwarming time of my entire history streaming and something I'll never forget. At some point after my voice healed, I began allowing everybody to hang out in the call after I'd gone to bed, which over time evolved into what I believe was an unhealthy situation of some people staying up all night to talk to chat. While I appreciate that you guys enjoy the community enough to do this, I feel that I should be the only one expected to stay on my stream for long hours like that, especially since I'm the one who's profiting from the sub incentives as well. Some would say it's no big deal or that it's fine, which is very kind, but it still doesn't address that this is a lot of time spent on a stream that is not theirs to benefit from objectively. And in general, it's pretty easy to lose track of time talking to this community. So closing off that option entirely felt like the most ethical plan this time, and is largely why I chose to keep this year's night sections restricted to only the soothing sounds of the movie orchestra. But to the mods who supported me last year during and after the voiceless Mars saga, I will always appreciate the time that you gave to my stream and insisting for nothing in return. I wish that we could have tried the 2-hour block at a time idea for the mods to do stuff with chat this year, but I did not want any of you to feel stressed out with how low the timer was the entire event. And of course, thank you to everyone who supported the event, whether it was with subs, donations, merch, or simply chatting and using channel points you saved up from watching the speedruns to vote for games. If it weren't for this community's game suggestions and sense of humor, I would not have had nearly as much fun as I did this year. It took us around 3 months to plan the whole thing, picking all the games in chat, and me ordering the physical copies to get that authentic Shrek experience. Ultimately, I enjoyed this subathon a lot more overall. I felt it was handled far better on my end as well, after going through 80 days of it last year and reflecting on it. Experiencing what felt like a never-ending infinite money glitch is a tough thing to digest and navigate with clarity. Even returning to speedruns cold turkey after last year's ended was tough to deal with mentally for months, because constantly receiving donations just felt like breathing at that point, which is crazy to think about for what just started as a week-long meme. I just hope this recent event has shown that I've taken time to reflect on how to handle it better, even if it wasn't perfect, especially toward the end. Subathon culture can become problematic if not handled properly, and it just so happened my first real one I've done became an overnight success with no time to ground myself and see it for what it was. The dedication I put into my game and stream over the years was reciprocated by the fans who'd grown up watching me for 6 years up to that point. With such a consistent and organized stream of support, it just started to feel normal. Much like the many fans who don't feel entitled to me speedrunning BFBB and show their appreciation even though they know I'll be there doing it every single day. This is the attitude I owed everyone during that subathon who saved and waited for years for an opportunity to support me like this. It should never have felt normal or expected. And the hardest part of running an event like this is keeping a level head and remembering everyone out there is an individual who decided to generously support my stream. Learning these important lessons while the whole platform scrutinized and even tried to emulate the magic we created felt like a lot of pressure to make it truly great. And I feel that sentiment being shared by myself and my fans is what led to it getting out of control, to the point where I even tried to hard cap it at 100 days as mentioned, but the viewers just couldn't agree to accept it. I'm just happy this recent one ended once we all realized deep down it needed to. It's a shame the final few days were rough, but overall it was still a great time and in most ways was better than last year's. Progress is progress, and I believe that's a valid marker of my intentions and dedication to improving my own character and running better events. And if we decide to do another one, I'm sure the third time's the charm. We've been discussing the possibility of a 12-day capped event for the holidays, but I wanted to get this retrospective out before any serious discussion about that. I already have a pretty developed idea of what it would be, and it's a great one, but these are still community events, and I want to hear what you guys think about where we've been before we can discuss where we're going. I've had some of my all-time favorite moments of streaming during these events, and with better communication and refining of these mentioned aspects, I believe we can run one that's fun and worthwhile the whole way through. And I want to finish with this so it's not overlooked. Throughout this subathon, we played many SpongeBob games, good and bad. We played many more games that were just bad, and several classic and genre-defining platformers from the early 2000s I believe would change my perspective on my own favorite game. But even so, I've only gained a greater appreciation for Battle for Bikini Bottom through all this. It's still my favorite favorite video game of all time, and my mission to optimize it as a speedrun is still alive and well. So I appreciate your patience because it takes a lot of time and a lot of struggle to see any improvements after one-upping myself for nearly 8 years and counting at this point. To those of you who still support that mission through the good and bad, you're the real ones. Since the very beginning, sub and donation incentives have been the only practical way to support my speedrunning and streaming passions full-time. And if you guys think we can get the subathon formula right the third time, I'd be happy to give it another try instead of going back to the scattered incentives, because a lot of people enjoyed these events even if they weren't perfect. Let me know your thoughts in the comments or in my stream chat while I'm live. I'll do my best to read all of them. Thank you for watching. This has been the good,
Let's fucking go!
the bad,
Just fucking end it!
and of course, the
I'm so dark, I just fucking love being fucking fucking white, fucking
5 minutes I spent researching wedding vows. Now pronounce you man and movie. You may now movie the movie.
It's movie forever!
Yo, SHiFT, this movie Madness stuff was pretty cool and the SpongeBob is cute too. But have you considered how epic Volcano Madness Island-A-Thon would be? I literally got that game for Christmas when I was still in my dad's balls. I'm so glad you're thinking about doing another subathon because I know which game I want you to play for 7 weeks straight.